Hello! So I was gonna go watch the Han Solo movie and do a review of that, but I didn't. I couldn't be bothered to go. Recently, I have watched the original Mad Max trilogy and the Evil Dead trilogy, and I noticed how the trilogy has a very similar shape to it between the two of them. I won't go into it now, because that'll come later in the video, but it got me thinking about the shapes of other trilogies. So a trilogy is 3 movies, which means that there are 6 permutations of how you can rank the movies in a trilogy. And I've been thinking about which movie trilogies fit into which of these categories. A lot of this is going to be personal preference. Some of it might be like the consensus opinion, and I want to talk about what this means for the movies and any common themes between them. So let's get started. First up, 1, 2, 3. So the first movie was the best, and then it gradually got worse. So this is like the standard you would expect. The first movie does really well. The studio wants to cash in on this great property, so they make a second movie, but it's less original, it's less inspired, it's generally worse. But it does well enough to get a third movie, so they make the third movie and it's even worse. There's not that many iconic trilogies that follow this shape because the third movie tends to be very bad. So I like to call this one the standard Hollywood cash-in, and here's a few examples. The Jurassic Park movies. First one's really good, second one's still okay, and then the third movie wasn't that good. The Alien movies, it's a bit more debatable, but I feel like the first one's the best. Second one is still very good, but not as good. The third one is where it started falling off a cliff. The Pitch Perfect movies. First one is like a cool idea. It's not an amazing movie, but it's like a fun time. Second one, Third one, and the Matrix movies. First one's got a really interesting idea. Second one brings a few things to it. Third one kind of gets lost in some of the ideas. Right, next up is the 1-3-2 trilogy, or as I like to call it, we took a risk in the middle and it didn't pay off. So what I'm talking about here is where the first movie did well, and then they try and do the second movie and do something interesting or different with it, and it doesn't work, but at least they were trying. So the one that kind of encapsulates this is Indiana Jones. First movie is great. Second movie, they try and make it a bit dark and a bit weird, and it's still a good movie, but it's definitely not as good. And then for the third movie, they kind of go back to what they were doing in the first one. For me, personally, the Lord of the Rings movies are a 1-3-2. You might disagree, but those movies are all really good. But Two Towers stands out a bit as it doesn't really have its own place in the story, being the middle section. It's tied to both other movies. The Men in Black trilogy is a 1-3-2. First movie's great, second movie is not good, but they did do something completely different from the first film. And then for the third movie, it's still something interesting, closer to the first movie though. Next up, it's the 2-1-3. Second movie's best, then first, then third. Or as I like to call it, we took a risk in the middle, and this time it did pay off. So the obvious one here is the Star Wars original trilogy. Personally, I like A New Hope more than Empire, but Empire is everyone loves this movie. It's the best in the trilogy because it's got like the interesting themes, it's doing something different, going in a more character-driven direction rather than plot, as well as the Star Wars original trilogy. I'm also talking about Terminator here. It takes the kind of formula from the first one, but does something interesting, having the original Terminator come back as a hero. The less we talk about Terminator 3, the better, but the first Terminator is still really good. Also here, we have the Dark Knight Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. I've done it! I'm talking about a Batman movie and I've got a Batman mug. Yeah, the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. The Dark Knight is clearly the best one, and then Batman Begins is pretty good. Dark Knight Rises kind of like, it's a bit iffy. It's still a good time, and if you liked the other ones, you'll like that. The second one is like so far ahead of these other ones. While I've got the Batman mug, the Tim Burton Batman trilogy, It's not really a trilogy because there were 4 movies and he didn't direct the 3rd one. But Batman Returns is better than Batman, and then Batman's better than Batman Forever. That movie is very bad. And then also the X-Men's, X-Men, X-Men 2, X-Men Last Stand. Last Stand's very bad. X-Men 1's pretty good. X-Men 2 is the best one by far. Same with the Spider-Man Sam Raimi ones. Next up is the 231, which is the one that made me want to make this video. The 231 is the trilogy that I like to call the first movie was really cheap and then we got a budget. In this category we've got the original Mad Max trilogy. So the first movie was quite good for what it was. It was a very low budget independent movie. There were some cool ideas, but it didn't have the budget and like studio support to make it great. Then, because of the success of the first movie, it got a huge budget for the second film. Huge by like that time period. Not huge anymore. And the second film kind of did what the first one was trying to do, but it could actually do it now because of the budget. So Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, is a great film. And then they made the 3rd one and it was really weird and different, but still better than the first. So Beyond Thunderdome is nothing like the other 2 Mad Max movies. The other 2 are more all about like, they're more about cars. He doesn't even drive a car in the 3rd film really, apart from right at the end. And he spends all this time with this like group of wild children in the desert, but it's still pretty good. Also in this category is the Evil Dead trilogy. The first Evil Dead is pretty good, but you could tell it was made very cheaply. So when it did well and it got like a following and they had the budget for the second film is basically a remake of the first film, but it nails the tone more. It's got better effects, it's got more interesting stuff going on. And then the 3rd film, again like Mad Max, is very weird where it's set in medieval times. Next up is the 312. 3rd movie's the best, then 1, then 2. This category I like to call we switched director for the 3rd film. This one might be more like my personal feelings than like what other people think, but this is a category where I would put the Mission Impossible movies, where the first one's pretty good, the second one's kind of a disaster. Then they switched director, they brought in J.J. Abrams for the 3rd film, and they gave the franchise a new lease of life. That movie is better than the other ones. Also in this category, it's not really a trilogy because it's part of the series, but the first 3 Harry Potter films. First 2 are very rigid, they're very close to the books, both directed by Christopher Columbus. They brought in Alfonso Cuarón for the 3rd movie and he gives it this whole new look and he opens the world up and you understand all of Hogwarts a lot better. All the kids feel more like kids. It's way better than the first 2. And then you might not consider them like true trilogies because they're part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I feel like the Thor movies and the Iron Man movies both fit in here. So Thor 1 and 2 are kind of stuffy and boring and not that exciting, and then Taika Waititi came in, just completely flipped it on its head and made Thor a way more interesting character than he's ever been before. And then I might get some flack for this one, but I think the Iron Man franchise, I think Iron Man 3 is the most interesting movie because it tests Tony Stark more as a character. It's got more interesting action stuff going on. People don't like the Mandarin fake out, but I'm not a massive comic book fan, so that didn't bother me at all. First Iron Man movie is still very good, and then the second one's kind of messy. But I feel like bringing in Shane Black for the 3rd one was a really good move. And finally, 321, where the movies get progressively better as they come out. So I feel like this is probably the least common structure for a trilogy to follow, mainly because if the first movie's not good, then you don't make a 2nd and 3rd one, because people don't want that. So anything that's in this category, the 3 movies are very close together with how good they are. So I feel like the Star Wars prequels fit in this category. It's kind of weird talking about the prequels. Revenge of the Sith isn't terrible. The things that make it bad are holdovers from the other films, like Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace. But the Star Wars prequels are all pretty bad. Also in this category, I think the Toy Story films are. It's pretty close between 2 and 3, but I personally think 3's a bit better. If you think 2's better, like, I'll agree with you because they're so close. Toy Story is obviously the first feature-length CGI movie. They were still kind of working it out as they went along. And then Toy Story 2 came out a little bit after that. And then when Toy Story 3 comes out, they've got a big gap where they've been learning more about what they're doing. By the time that comes out, they've really like perfected it. And also in this category, I feel like the new Planet of the Apes trilogy is. I really like these films. I still have no idea what order they are in. I know War comes last, but Rise and Dawn, are they in that order? Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. That sounds about right. So the first one is, it's fine, a bit too much James Franco for me. But then the second one is a lot more interesting because it focuses more on Caesar as a character. And then the third one just like nails it. I think Andy Serkis' performance is great. I really recommend the Planet of the Apes movies. Go check them out. So there you go. That was just like a quick chat about trilogies because it's something I've been thinking about. If you want to try and categorize some trilogies that I haven't mentioned, if you've got any more 2-3-1s or 3-2-1, I'd love to hear them because I was really struggling to think of them. Please don't tell me in the comments that Iron Man 3 was bad because that movie's good. I'm mostly kidding. You can like do what you want. You're allowed to not like films. Place your bets on what the Jurassic World trilogy is gonna look like. What Avatar 1, 2 and 3 will come out like. Thanks for watching. I'll see you another time. Bye. Bye, 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 bye.